Hi, how you doing? Thanks for reaching out. I think the question that you have, and I've de-identified it over here. The question that you have is tricky because it's looking at known societal issue like domestic violence. We have people with undocumented or immigrant status, maybe even refugee status. We could stir in would be related, and then we're looking at barriers, cultural language, legal status. And how do we find those sorts of things might not show up in the traditional places that we would look in social work. So let me show you how I would approach this. And I think there's going to be lots and lots, like too much stuff on this. So I think we're in good shape. First of all, for a literature review, do you need to just have scholarly articles, which is what I'm guessing, like peer-reviewed scholarly articles, something like that? There might be things in books that you could look in the library catalog. So let me know if you need to find books. But books, especially in an academic library these days, seems to be like somebody's published or a group of people like sociologists have published on something for decades, and then this book is kind of like a textbook that they catch students up with and things like that. So we'll go to the scholarship. So we could go to databases and look under specific sets of databases, but I have one just for social work. I have a guide for my favorite databases. So if you go to research guides, all the different disciplines are here. Oh, I just thought of another place to go to. All the librarians are here too. So we can just look for social work. And then my guide will be at social work. And then I have a PhD and master's help tab. I don't know if you can see the URL up there. But this is where I would go, especially for the public policy and international relation. The way that works with undocumented or immigrants and things like that is, I think I have a few places to try. And you can tell I don't have confidence because I'm starting to waffle. So this first place, here's the library catalog I talked about. These are okay, the CQ for public policy. They're not scholarly, but it might talk about some of the issues. But I think since you have such a good set of factors that you're interested in, like populations, domestic violence, and barriers, I think we can go into the discipline-specific research. So the places that I would recommend, and I'm going to go through these with you, are going to be PsycInfo is going to be really good, and that's going to be the practice of psychology. But they're not going to talk about the international stuff completely. So I think sociological abstracts and PAIS are also going to be a good place to go. But let me walk you through how I would approach it. So sociological abstracts is where I would start. This is sociology. So this is looking at issues, normal things happening or change, all in communities and cultures, cities, towns, or society as a whole, which is a bunch of communities interacting with each other. And this is worldwide that this is approached. So even though this isn't social work, it's looking at those factors like immigrant status and things like that. Excuse me. So, excuse me. So when we're going into a database like this, though, so we already have risk factors is probably going to be built in, so we don't need that. But somebody who has the status of an immigrant and then a specific gender, those are things that we could look for. But what we could do is we could have a row for each concept. So let's start with the immigration status. Immigrant or immigration, or I don't know if they would use immigrant. That's somebody leaving a country. So for example, a year or two ago, there was a large group of people who left Guatemala per se. They emigrated from Guatemala and they immigrated into Mexico and ultimately the United States, I think was the goal. So we could look at that as well. But you can also see there's a whole bunch of different things. There's like legal status, But I think we're okay putting off the legal status for now. Or if it's a refugee status, I think we could just talk about somebody moving from one place to another. And so that's that concept. And we could look in, I think the abstract would be a good place to narrow them down, but we can just leave it open for now. And then we want women, and this would specifically be in the abstract. So the abstract in a scholarly article is going to be a short version of everything that's important in the rest of the article. So it's kind of like they're going to use all the keywords like gender specificity. So women or female. Oops, I can spell female. And here you can see. We could also do or gender if we wanted to, but I think that you could even do or girl or girls. That gets into like an age range, but it still is. So it looks like you're just looking at women. So let's put that one down. And then another concept is domestic violence. That one is very well established, and so I don't think we need to have synonyms for that. But we would want to have it in quote marks because it's two keywords and we want those to be stuck together when the search happens. We want it to find domestic violence, not domestic here and violence there, if that makes sense. And then last concept, this one, I don't know if we can search for these. Let's dig around and see what we find. So I'm interested in finding, but specifically, domestic violence, women, and let's do abstract for all of those three. And maybe you can sort through these and look for those cultural barriers, language barriers, and legal status, because I think those are going to show up maybe in all of the articles. And then we want peer-reviewed. Okay, let's see what happens. Oh, 146. Oh yeah, there's risk factors. Here's a cool thing that you can consider from a sociology perspective. They are not looking at immigration from one point of view, but they're going all over the world. So here we have Korea. There's probably going to be people, there's Arizona, there's former Soviet Union, Israel. It's going to be looking all over the place, and I think that's good. I don't think there's going to be a lot of difference, but we might find the commonality of sources of problems and potential interventions and solutions. So that one's pretty good. This is a date range right here. So some of these are pretty old. If you wanted to get up to the most recent 10 years, you can do it that way. And there's still 61. So let's try this search. See if it exists still. Yay, it stayed. Okay, I'm going to copy this search into another database. Let's find, I'm going to go back to that guide. I should have opened up a new tab. So the next database we can try that search in is PAIS. PAIS is public policy worldwide. So this is like international and national and local law where people are recognizing specific problems and then they're intervening with legal. So there's like protection for women or there's recognition of issues like that. So I'm hoping we're going to find some good stuff in here that's not from the perspective of psychology per se, but maybe just changing the world, as it were. So let me go. So I got my advanced search. Do that in the abstract. I'll do this concept. Also in the abstract. I'm going to add a row. Do domestic violence. And then we've already checked that. And we are in PAIS. So instead of looking sociology, it's looking specifically at laws and government interaction. And I think we'll find a lot. Oh, okay, not as much. So this is where I was talking about that it's a big deal where we intervene on behalf of the health of women who are suffering from domestic violence. But that, that can happen medically, or it can happen psychologically, or it can happen at the government level. And so this represents the government level. So this might be pretty good. So community partnerships, they're talking about forced marriage and all sorts of different things. Again, this is all over the world. Let's try one. PsycInfo. This is really popular in social work because this is the psychology database. And so let's give this a try. And maybe we should start looking for some of your other keywords too. Let's do our search again. That's in the abstract. Abstract. And domestic violence. Abstract. Okay, let's see what happens. I think there's a way to narrow it down to peer review. There's our peer review button right there. Okay, now we're looking in psychology. So there's 123. They're looking at all of these different ideas. But now, let's add one more line. And let's start putting in some of these themes. Cultural barrier. Ooh, you know what? If you put a star, it'll catch cultural barrier or cultural barriers. Let's see what happens with that. So now we know we have 123. Oh, so is this why we were running into problems? Finding things. It could be that adding that extra line where you're looking for cultural barrier, where they were studying it. So you might have to go through, let's look at language barrier. Language barrier, and again, I'll do a star so it catches. Oh, there's 4. Okay. It really narrows it down though, doesn't it? I would say if you try this 4th line in any of these databases, know that you can always back out and look at a search without that line. And then you could go in and you could see, so here's help-seeking behavior. So, excuse me. Help-seeking behavior. Oh, this is a scoping review, so this isn't original research. It's a meta-analysis where they look at a bunch of different articles. Let's look at this one. Oh, there's another one, intimate partner violence. So domestic violence or intimate partner violence. So we even expanded our keyword one more time. But what you can do is you can go in and you can see just in the abstract where we're looking for cultural, language, or legal status, and you can just categorize it. Here's one. So they even talk about it. So this is legal status. Experiences, so there's gender, stereotypes, communal caretakers, defied gender roles, substance abuse, there's migration. So it looks like this one could be categorized as immigration status. So if you go into this one, that would be classified as legal status. So you might have to go through and look for where does the article lean the most. So this one, it didn't talk about cultural barriers because it was two domestic partners or intimate partners that were from ostensibly the same community, culture, nationality, city, language, things like that. So that wasn't a barrier. Language barrier wouldn't be a problem with that. So legal status, that would probably be where this fell under because somebody might not feel safe enough leaving, and so they denigrated themselves into traditional submissive roles because they were kind of stuck, if that makes sense. So there's some interpretation. I'm happy to help with as you go, but these are the ways that I would go. So it was sociological abstracts, psych info, and PAIS looked like they were going to be the really good ones. So let me know how it goes. And sorry for the long video. I think this is a fantastic topic, and it's being discussed right now in nations all over the world. So thank you for being a part of the solution, and I'm excited to see what happens. Thanks.